The niche that I got into as a project manager when I was just starting out as a launch manager. So I was helping people launch their digital products and online program. And if that sounds like something interesting to you, I'm dropping a free resource in the description of this video. It's a day in the life of a launch manager, and it's a really cool checklist that takes you through everything I do as a launch manager on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis for my launch clients. So you can see if this is the kind of work that you'd actually enjoy doing. So you can check that out in the link in the description below this video. If you've been thinking about becoming a freelance project manager, but you have zero experience with project management, then this video is for you. I was exactly where you are now back in 2015 when I started freelancing in the online space. I had no experience as a project manager. I had no degree related to project management or any certification or anything like that. And I didn't really even know what a project manager did, except for obviously manage projects. So flash forward almost 10 years later, and I have a thriving business as a freelance project manager, working with really awesome clients that I love who are doing really cool stuff in the world. And I was able to double what I was making as a full-time accountant, working only part-time hours as a freelance project manager. So in this video, I'm basically going to break it down into parts so that you can see the trajectory that I took to become a project manager with no experience to where I am now, so you can see what's possible for you. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to follow the exact same path or that this is the only path. But I do think the specific parts of my journey that I'm going to share are what make me so good at being a project manager and able to grow my business to the point that I love what I do and I love who I'm working with, and I'm also able to make a really comfortable living. I kick off with what I did before I became a project manager, and I really want you to pay attention to this part because you may be thinking like, why do I need to know this? But it's gonna show you how you can take what you've done in the past and incorporate it into becoming a successful freelance project manager today. Okay, so way back, my very first job was working in a market research firm when I was 15 years old. I was like this young, shy kid, just like reading this script where I had to call people at home at dinner time and ask them to take these marketing surveys. And no, people did not really like that I was calling them while they were trying to eat their dinner. And so for people that are working in market research now in the digital age, you're really lucky because a lot of this stuff is now done so much online that hopefully you don't have to deal with the same stuff that I did. But I guess I did a good enough job because then they asked me to start helping to facilitate focus groups where people would come in and do like taste tests and stuff like that. And I would basically help run those and collect the data and then submit it to the company. And so this was kind of the start of me learning people skills outside of like my family, outside of schools, and like my friend group, and like interacting with other people and like building up interpersonal communication, organization, like data collecting, and honestly developing a little bit of a thicker skin because I was really shy at the time, and I would call people. Some people were really nice who knew who we were and had done surveys for us before, and some people were right nasty to me. And I really had to learn how to separate and not take things personally when people were treating me like that. So I had to kind of hang up the phone and then brush it off and pick up the phone and then make another call like it was like the first call that I had made of the day. And when I left market research, I started working at Pier 1 Imports. So I started out, I don't know if does anybody remember Pier 1 Imports? I don't even know if they're around anymore, but I basically worked there from when I was 16 to 23, and I started as a store associate and then got promoted to assistant manager and then stockroom coordinator, and then transitioned to associate manager again at a different store. And so as an assistant manager, I had to run the daily reports and allocate our resources of the store to make sure that we were able to get those things done. And there was obviously like a lot of organization and time management because we were on the floor taking care of customers and then also like stocking and doing merchandising, customer service on the phone or like people in front of us. So, again, just like building those people skills, organizational skills, and learning a little bit more like management and back end operations stuff. And then from there, I actually started working in restaurants. So I was a server, I was a bartender, I was running tables, filling drink tickets, making sure people had a really great experience. And then finally, I got my degree in accounting in 2008, got a job at a medium-sized business that was local to me, and worked my way up to assistant controller before I resigned and started running my business in 2015. And that's when I became a freelance project manager. And so how that happened was I happened to see a job posting from someone who was actually launching their project management agency. They were a project manager and they were booked out with clients and they didn't want to stop being able to take on more clients. So they wanted to hire someone underneath them to basically come in and help project manage on their behalf for their clients. Before I read that job description, I actually had literally no idea of what a project manager did. But I read the job description and I was thinking back to all of this experience that I just explained to you. And I was like, oh, I could see myself doing this. And so I applied and I got the job. My interview was kind of funny because I applied, I had to do an interview, I did a paid test project, and then she like asked to book a call with me after she went through my test project. And she came on and she was just like, okay, so your first client's gonna be so-and-so, who was like a huge name in the online industry at that point. And I was like, wait, am I hired? And she was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that, yeah, you're hired. So that was kind of funny, but basically, that was the start of my freelance project management career, which led me to building my own project management and consulting agency. And now I do freelance project management on a daily basis. As I mentioned, I doubled my accounting salary working less than full-time hours, and I absolutely love what I do every single day. And so the reason that I'm sharing this is because if I would have looked back at the jobs that I had, market research associate, Pier 1 import store associate, waitress, bartender, like you will see nowhere in any of those job titles was project manager. And if you would have asked me when I started my business if I had project management skills, I would have said no. But I can look back at all of those jobs now and like pick out all of the things that I learned that make me a really effective project manager. And so now I'm going to share what those skills are. So the first skill is organization. As a project manager, you're organizing the resources of a project, whether that's human resources, financial resources. You're overseeing all of the moving parts. So there's project briefs and plans and files, meetings and communication. And so like all of that might sound overwhelming if you haven't done it before. But if you're organized, all of these things can really flow smoothly and efficiently when you tap into your organization skills. And one of the jobs that I had that actually helped me develop my organizational skills the most was working in a restaurant. If you've ever worked as a server or a bartender at like 7:30 on a Saturday night at a fully booked restaurant, running 5 to 8 tables at a time, your organization skills have to be on point or like you're gonna lose your shit. Your customers are not gonna be happy and the other people you work with aren't either. The second skill is leadership. I think sometimes when we say leadership, people actually think of authority. And so authority is defined as the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. But authority is not what makes an effective project manager. Leadership is. And so leadership, alternatively, is defined as guiding, motivating, or influencing people toward a common vision or goal. And in my experience, it actually means sometimes you let other people lead and like you take a back seat. So for instance, when I first started out as a project manager, like I thought I was owning the project, so I had to have all of the answers to every question that anybody asked. I thought I had to know the right decision to make in any situation, in any circumstance that arose. Not only was that extremely exhausting, but it actually didn't serve my success, the success of the project, or the team as a whole. The whole point of working with a team is collaboration, right? There's people that have strengths to complement other people's weaknesses. And so you have this amazing combination of skills and experience and knowledge that all complement each other. And so I found when I let go of equating leadership with authority and instead showing up more in like what they call servant leadership, like I got a lot better at what I did and was able to lean into my strengths, and also like the projects that I was working on flourished. And so this was something I had to lean into when I was managing an accounting department. You know, I mentioned that I had an accounting degree. I was the assistant controller, so I was doing like the monthly budgets and the reconciliations. But if someone had a purchasing question, I didn't assume I needed to know every detail of every current active purchasing contract. I would go to the purchasing associate. Or if we were running a government contract, like I didn't know all of the clauses inside of that contract, I would go ask our government contracting agent. And so it was kind of silly of me when I started working as a project manager to think that I was supposed to hold all of that knowledge. Like I never did that in my past job. So that's something really as a leader you need to step into, is like leaning into other people's knowledge and expertise and experience and staying in your lane in those skills that you have and the skills and experience that you have. Okay, the third skill set that I think is like absolutely crucial is, and I don't think this is just for project management, I think this is literally for anything ever in life, business, work, whatever, is problem solving. If you're a book nerd like me, maybe you've heard the saying or some version of this saying, the best laid plans often go awry, right? No matter how good of a project manager you are, no matter how well planned something is, no matter what an amazing team you have, there's stuff that's going to come up that is out of your control. You're working with humans, which can make mistakes. You're working with technology, which can break. And so there's some things that you can look ahead to and anticipate risks and solve them ahead of time. And there's other things that happen in the moment that you need to solve on the fly. So you need to be able to pull the team together to develop solutions for breakdowns, for potential risk, or for actual breakdowns, and figure out what's the best course of action for solving those issues. And not only will that help make the project go smoother, your clients will absolutely love if you and the team have solved a problem before they even know that it happened. After a breakdown, I've literally had clients say like, "Oh my God, I'm having so much fun running this project with you." Your clients will love working with you if you have problems solved before they even know that anything even happened. All right, the fourth skill is communication. And again, I feel like this is something like across the board. If you go to apply for a job or you're trying to work with a business partner, collaborate with someone, like everybody wants someone who is an effective communicator. I'd have to create an hour-long video of all the ways that communication can affect a project. But as a project manager, you're allocating resources, you're managing resources. And one of those most important resources is people. Like you can't work with other people unless you communicate with them. And in order to get the best out of the people that you're working with, to communicate around scope and around due date, to make sure people have what they need before to make sure people have what they need to be successful. All of this encompasses communication. Communication is involved in all of this, building rapport, helping team members resolve conflicts or problems, or going back to the problem solving piece, right? Like I was just on a launch where I was gathering the reporting every week. And one of the things I noticed was that like when we started our launch, our email deliverability went down by a lot. And so I'm not an email marketing expert, but I knew like what reporting to go look at. And I figured out that our, something called our DMARC success rate had fallen from like 100% to like 60 or 80%. And again, I'm not an email marketing expert, so I had no idea how to solve this problem. So I had to communicate to the person on the team that did have expertise in email marketing, like what had happened, why we were concerned, what the goal, how this was affecting the launch, communicate the urgency of it so that we could solve the problem and get it fixed so it didn't affect the launch any more negatively than it already had. So we talked about organization, we talked about leadership, about problem solving, about communication. So I want to look back to the experience that you do have if you don't have specific project management experience, and see where can you pick out in the roles that you've had like these qualities and these skills, because they're four of the most crucial skills to have as a project manager. And even if you don't have project management experience, if you have these skills, you can still be a really great project manager. Now, that being said, having no experience as a project manager definitely has its challenges. So I want to real talk about some of the challenges that I experienced as a project manager with no experience that you may also come across when you start freelancing as a project manager. And I'll also talk through how I overcame them. So one of the very first challenges I had was not understanding the lingo of the industry that I was working in. So I had come, like I said, from working in retail, in restaurants, in accounting, which was doing like laboratory and accounting for like a laboratory equipment distributor. So I was going from that to the digital marketing space. And so people were using words and terms that I had never heard of and had no clue what they meant. Like this, the most ridiculous example I can give you is when right before I became a project manager online, I had an interview with a gentleman I was interviewing to do some administrative work for him, some freelance administrative work. And we're on the interview and he asks me like, do you have the bandwidth to like help with these projects, to help with these tasks? And like I'm like bandwidth. And I start going on about my network and internet connectivity. And like he was talking about my capacity to take the work on, like my capacity to actually do the work, not like my internet speed. And so I could tell as soon as I started saying that, like I was answering the wrong question. It was so embarrassing. The very first project that I managed was the launch of a digital course. It was a huge launch. Another funny aside, on my interview with the woman that hired me for my first project management job, I filled out the application. We had an interview. She assigned me, she asked me to do a paid test project, which I did. And then she asked me for a follow-up call after the test project. So we get on there. She's like, okay, wow, you did such a good job with the test project. So I got hired to run this launch, which turned out to be a $1.7 million revenue launch. This was the first project I ever managed with zero project management experience and zero experience in the digital marketing industry. Like the only cloud-based software I had used was like Microsoft Office, right? And so that launch, like they were using words and talking about things that I had literally not a clue what they were talking about. Like, I also didn't want to say that because I didn't want to sound like I didn't know what I was talking about. I had to go do research on my own and look up these words that they were talking about and figure out other words that people were using to talk about the same thing. We were launching a digital course, so they were talking about doing a webinar with an opt-in and doing lead magnets and freebies. All of the people on the team are using these different words. Well, come to find out they all mean the same thing, but I didn't know that. I had to kind of build this library or this glossary for myself. So what I would recommend for you if you're just starting out in project management is to start to do research around the terminology that's used in the industry that you want to go into. So whether it's the construction industry or real estate or digital marketing, start to research, follow blogs, watch YouTube content, maybe follow some industry leaders and start to learn the lingo so that when the opportunity presents itself for a project in that industry, you feel like you've got a good foundation on how to communicate with people. The second challenge that I had was that I did not know the systems and the software that people were using in their online businesses, because this was now the industry that I was working with and the people that I were working with had online businesses. I was managing these projects where they were talking about building out email marketing campaigns or sales funnels and landing pages. And I had no idea in things like Lead Pages and Thinkific at the time, which were like two of the big softwares at the time. I'm dating myself a little bit here. I didn't know everything that went into building things in these systems. And while I don't think as a project manager that you need to know, that you need to personally understand how to build things in those systems, I didn't know how long things took or what people needed in order to be able to do their tasks in those systems. So what I had to do here, what I would recommend for you is again, to lean into the learning, kind of absorb and consume as much information that you have the capacity for on other industry blogs and YouTube channels and things like that, but also leverage that skill of communication that you have from other past jobs and other past experience talk to the people on the team and ask them questions, right? Like have a conversation with them about what they do need in order to build out an email campaign or a sales funnel. How much time do they need when you get them everything that they need to when they actually need to deliver it? So their turnaround times or their lead times. You've really got to have those conversations and build that learning for yourself. And then as you do, there's a lot of systems out there that are kind of interchangeable. You know what I mean? If you're working in lead pages or ClickFunnels or building something, even building just a sales funnel using WordPress, like the process is kind of the same. Now, what I did, I took it a step further and I actually took a position as a freelance funnel builder at the same time while I was working as a project manager. And I got to actually learn how to build this stuff out. I got to learn firsthand these systems. And that actually made me so much better at my job. Again, I learned firsthand like what people need, what team members needed to be able to build these things out. I knew how much time it took. So I knew how much of a turnaround time to build into projects. I understood the terminology that they were using. And I think people really got to trust me and it built a rapport with people because I really had a really deep understanding of their role and like also like how challenging it was, right? So I was able to have like a lot of empathy towards them as well. And the third and final challenge that I want to mention in this video was really my confidence. And I mean, that came from me knowing that I had no titled experience as a project manager. I mean, I had a business degree in accounting, but like that didn't really translate to, aside from being really detail oriented and like good with numbers, that didn't really translate to being a project manager. I didn't have a PMP certification. So I felt like even though most teams I joined didn't know that I didn't have any experience, I felt like people saw like right through me. And so not having that confidence really affected my ability to build deeper connections with people because again, I felt like they weren't going to trust me or respect me. It held me back from having conversations because I felt like I was like asking too many questions, or I didn't want people to lose faith that I like had any clue what I was doing, even though I clearly did not. But what I did to build my confidence was one, just like doing it. Like I knew once I read that job description for a project manager, I was like, this sounds cool. This sounds like something I would really enjoy doing. And once I did it, like I affirmed that. Like I was like, I do really like this. This does really lend itself to my strengths. And so I kept taking on more projects, even when it was uncomfortable, even when I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. Like that's how I built my learning. And like going back to my leadership, like I leaned on the people on the team to bridge those gaps of the knowledge that I didn't have, of the expertise and experience that I didn't have. I asked questions, I had conversations. I leaned into those communication skills. I tapped into my organization skills by documenting what I learned, right? Like now, when I started, I didn't know how to build out a project plan. And every time I built out a project plan, I built it out from scratch. Now I have a library of dozens of project management templates that I can just, anytime I do a podcast launch, I can pull up my podcast launch template. Or if I do a product launch, I can pull that up. And so I documented templates and stuff like that, but also just like the things that the lessons that I've learned, the terminology that I've picked up, the other skills that have grown as part of being a project manager. I took some leadership trainings. I did trauma therapy. I worked with a trauma coach. I did trauma therapy. I mean, these are getting a little bit more deep, but the whole point is I was constantly evolving. I was learning, I was growing. And all of this, everything we talked about today brings me to this point that despite the fact that I had zero experience as a project manager, I'd never held a titled project manager role. I didn't have a degree that was related to project management. I never got my PMP certification. I still have not gotten a project management certification. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And not that there's anything wrong with that. That's amazing. People that have their certifications. Like people that have their certifications, like that's awesome. I'm just saying you don't need to let those things stop you from doing something that you really think you're going to enjoy that like leverages your talents and your strengths and your experience. Without all of those things, I was still able to build what is a very, what I consider a really successful freelance project management career and not only do what I love every single day, but work with people that I love to work with who are doing really cool things that I feel really passionate about and invested in. I just started working with a trauma therapist who's like launching an accessible membership for people to work through their trauma. And I get to make a very comfortable living out of doing what I love doing. And it all started with just taking a risk on becoming a project manager when I had no experience. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it valuable. I'd love to hear in the comments like what skills you already have that you feel like would really lend themselves to becoming a freelance project manager. And if you're more interested in digital marketing project management or like online project management, which are honestly like huge fields to get into because the e-learning field is like still exploding. I have a free resource in the description of this video, which is basically a day in the life of a launch manager. So this is exactly what I do. This is a checklist of everything I do on the daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis as a launch manager who supports people in the digital marketing space with launching their online programs and digital courses and just running their online businesses and managing other projects in their online businesses. So if you, that will be helpful, you can grab that below. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, one of the other things I did in tandem with when I first started out as a project manager was actually learning how to work in the systems that my teams were using. And so that was how I started as a virtual assistant, and that was working as a virtual assistant. And I have another video which you can check out right here, and that basically takes you through becoming a virtual assistant with zero experience at all. Because these are both, whether it's project management or virtual assistant, and honestly, as a virtual assistant, I did both. And as a project manager, sometimes I did both when I had to like hop in and cover for team members. So you can check out that video for more learning, and I will see you in the next video.